All right. All right. 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Lightforge. This is ADWCTA.
This is Merps. Hello. Hope you guys are doing well. Let's talk some Hearthstone. Not huge changes this week. As we talked about last week, the expansion was revealed. We're waiting for that. Big changes are coming on the horizon for both Arena from an expansion perspective and for BGs as well. So that's what we're going to focus on today.
Yep. Let's start with BGs. We'll do a deep dive meta afterwards about general arena, like gameplay, like how to get better type stuff. About
Sure.
swing and your life total. But let's do Battlegrounds first, because I didn't even know this, because apparently I saw the words Fire Festival and I just didn't read that whole entire blog. I was like, the Fire Festival doesn't apply to me. It's about resources and stuff like that, and I'm not doing any of that, and it doesn't affect the
Skins,
arena.
right? A
Huh?
lot of skins.
A lot of skin.
Well,
Yeah,
right.
whatever.
A lot of
Um,
skins, a lot of things coming, and voice lines for your like Ragnaros bartender coming to BGs as well, which for the longest time I think a lot of people have been clamoring for, right? It's like just give us options to throw money at Blizzard, and Blizzard is finally doing it. And they came out with a lot at once. I was surprised at these huge bundles. So yeah, they're gonna be doing this. They're coming out July 27th. If I'm playing a lot of Battlegrounds at that point, why not, right? Like,
mhm.
I think that's pretty cool. It's a cool concept. You get a lot with this bundle. But what we really want to talk about is hidden under, and really, it's like the last thing under this Fire Festival and Future Fun post. You can find it on the Blizzard website as well. It previews what they call the next major Battlegrounds update. And what they're saying is at the end of the month, or soon TM, they are swapping out over 30 existing minions for new ones specifically designed to play off the quote core fantasy of that type and re-emphasize how the types play. This is like, let's break that down. That's huge. First of all, over 30 minions that are in right now, they are swapping out, which makes it one of just the biggest
Mhm.
changes we will have ever seen, right? Because you have a lot of patches that introduce big stuff, either big introductions or big changes. This is basically just the biggest patch ever because effectively, we've seen a lot of big patches that are like, oh, we're introducing this stuff, right? Well, they're taking out 30 minions, they're putting in 30 minions, and what they're doing is they're looking at all of the problems and all of the complaints that people have had about BGs. I certainly have had quite a few. This is one of the reasons why I dropped out of playing BGs for quite a few months. And then they're going to relook at all of these tribes and say, what is the quote core fantasy and what is the identity of this tribe? And they're going to try to hone in on that. I think that's perfect because I think there are quite a few tribes that are right now broken, either unplayable in some instances, too powerful in other instances, just don't have this identity. And whatever they started as, it's mutated to an extreme degree. So this is so needed. Like, I don't think it would have been enough for Blizzard to just be like, okay, we took out these two minions, we added these two, and we're tweaking kind of like, the way this thing works. Here you go. Blizzard previewed a tiny bit of the changes by saying, for example, pirates will have a bigger emphasis on amassing gold and treasure. And they previewed two new cards. So let's talk about these two new cards, and then let's talk about pirates. The first one is a tier 3 minion called Briny Bootlegger. So tier 3, 4/4 pirate. At the end of your turn, if you have another pirate, add a gold coin to your hand. And the golden version, of course, double the stats. And at the end of your turn, if you have another pirate, gain 2 gold coins to your hand. Then they also previewed a tier 6 minion called Nosy Looter, tier 6, 7/6 pirate. Every 2 turns, add a random gold minion to your hand. That's pretty good. Remember, it's a gold minion, so it's going to have the
You're going
the
to be able to
effects.
discover a 6
Right,
drop.
right. So you get it. You get the gold minion, and you can potentially use it if it's good and it works for you. But you also get that discover, and if you get a golden version of Nosing Looter, well, at the start of your turn, aka every turn, you add a random gold minion to your hand. Um, I think it's so cool and very telling that they started off with pirates, because I think if you ask a lot of people, pirates right now are the most broken class. And I don't want to use broken in terms of just overly powerful. Pirates, if you ask what their identity is, their identity is nothing. It's either scam, which is not pirates, right? It's like it's as much about Khadgar, Baron, and the mechanics of BG
Bugs,
itself, rather than pirates.
viruses.
And then after that, what is it? It's infinite pirates. Um, does anyone actually play infinite pirates by themselves anymore?
They
No.
shouldn't.
Infinite pirates are an accessory that people use, uh, whether with some specific heroes, for example, Gallowix, or, for example, you can use infinite pirates with something like Flat Tusk Agam, or just Flat Tusk builds in general. So right now, pirates are either scam or they are accessory engine tools for menagerie or other sort of like compositions that don't necessarily have to be pirates. So pirates themselves are just kind of broken. And whatever kind of identity or kind of goal the devs had at the very beginning, it just doesn't work. It's gone. Like, how many end game comps involve like a salty looter, right? In which you look at something like a salty looter, and that is kind of the mark of, do pirates work? If salty looters sometimes make it to end game comps, sometimes, right? It doesn't have to be very often, but sometimes. Sure, maybe, but it's never. Right now, it's never. And you just have these weird pirate things going on. So I think it's super telling that Blizzard sees this and they're like, okay, let's go with the most egregious example right now. It's pirates, not because like quote pirate comps never make it to the end. Because if you say it's like, oh, scam pirates or pirate comp, not really, right? It's not the way that they intended to for you to use pirates. So I think that's cool. And like, if we look at all of the tribes, we can already identify quite a few things wrong with them. If you remember in the podcast with Shady, we were talking about this. Like, okay, there are these problematic tribes. What do you do with them? And problematic could be in like the scaling is off. They're just boring to play. Sometimes both.
Mm-hmm.
Demons is one of them, right? I think demons have this very, very cool concept in which you use your HP to get some certain advantage. But right now, it's like, okay, there's shooty demons, and that's fine to an extent. In terms of having comps that don't win but can beat people up, like aggro builds are fine. But demons themselves are just feel a little bit too weak. They also just don't feel fun. I don't know exactly what their role is, but I don't think Blizzard is very happy with where demons are. Who knows, right? Like that's just sort of my view. Elementals, once again, we have a problem with tier 6 elementals just not really getting it done. Nomi elementals are still much better. So I don't know what they want to do there. But this has always been one of those things where we talk about these issues and it's like, oh man, they got to do some big changes. And if you're going to do big changes to one tribe, you might as well just do it all at once, right? It's sort of like if you're renovating the home and you're kind of just gotta get out of your house anyways because you can't live in there during that time and there's a lot of tinkering. Like just redo like more of the house during that time. Just sort of save yourself that effort, balance everything at once, test everything at once.
Because that's the thing, right? It's not about balance. Balance is easier, like strict balance, where you just get everything to about the same, right, win rate. It's about the core concepts that drive each of these tribes and what you want people to associate with the tribes and how they're different, right? A lot of this is about making them different. And right now, the tribes, some of them are different, but most of them are not that different. Like, dragons have a pretty distinct identity as the, get to the very end. Otherwise, you're not doing much with it. Mechs have had a pretty decent identity throughout. But most of the other tribes, Quillbor is, they're new, right? So they're the latest. So their identity hasn't been broken yet. But most of the other ones, they either have one that, like Merp says, their main mechanic is not actually being used to be successful, or they're just kind of, their identity has gotten diluted by the new stuff that's come out. Like, we're talking about tier 6 elementals. What are elementals? What's their thing? Oh, you want to get more of them, right? You want to like buy more of them so that you can play them and then sell them, right? That's their thing. Wait, where else have I heard that from? Like half of the tribes right now, right? Like, so you got to make them a little bit more distinct outside of the Nomi branch. So this is not just balance. If it's just about balance, you actually do want to balance it one at a time, because you can't balance it all at once. It's not possible. It'll just make a mess of everything. But if you're going to fundamentally change the entire, or like, I guess, update the entire thing of what each of the tribes stand for, then you're never going to have balance in any case. When the end of July hits and they launch whatever this 30 card swap is, balance is going to be terrible. Guaranteed to be absolutely horrific. Because that's how game design balancing works. You can't make this many changes to all your systems and then come out with a balanced game, especially because they're probably not testing it that intensely at Blizzard, because we know that they don't really do it that much, and we know that every time they release something, they have to like nerf stuff or buff stuff or what near immediately. They're just not good at it, or more likely they're not good at conceptualizing it and don't spend a lot of resources at actually testing it. So the balance is going to just be out the window. Like, I won't even talk about balance right now for this. This is about the themes and about getting Battlegrounds into an area that feels like a more cohesive kind of product with more interesting choices to be made and more interesting gameplay from I'm playing this and it feels fun perspective.
That's definitely very important, and for the long term, very necessary for people. Right now, there are numerous problems with BGs from a enjoyment factor, and I won't go into all of them because we've talked about all of them before. No need to rehash it. Plus, you can just go to Bob's Tavern. Everyone's talking about the same thing, anyways. And I am hoping that this kind of addresses some of them. Once again, it's not so much like we don't need to set like oh, if this patch doesn't fix it, it's over kind of thing. It a lot of the times it's just enough, at least for me, to see like, okay, they know what's going on, right? So with the patch that we described last week, I thought that was a move in the right direction because everything that they touched were things that were problematic. Now the meta's not solved. I'm not saying to myself like, oh, this is the perfect meta or anything. But they clearly identified that they knew what was wrong and that they were moving in the right direction. And I'm sure that was almost kind of like a experimental patch or like an alpha for this upcoming that we're going to this upcoming huge
yeah, it is weird that they made a really big patch right before, or not even before. It's like 3 weeks before the like even bigger patch.
I wonder if it's because that was kind of decided a little bit for, and this upcoming one, I don't think like at the time that patch went out, I don't think that this one was written in stone. They weren't just like waiting to release it, I think they were actually still testing some stuff. And for other things, I think they are actually, for example, looking at some data, whether internal data from their own testing, or they're looking at how this patch goes with some changes and using concepts from this one to decide, make decisions on that. And I think that's fine. And I agree, like with that amount of changes, something's going to be a little bit off. And that's fine.
Yeah, I think the difference you could draw between this future coming patch and the previous patch is that the previous patch was non-experimental. It was all slam dunks, right? Like, we were talking about the patch and we're like, everything is great about this patch. Like, there was like, I think one decision I didn't agree with. It was just mostly met with positive stuff because the stuff they were doing was generally non-controversial and they could fit into any meta. They're just like fixing heroes up, adjusting stuff that should have been done, way before. Nothing big and bad was going to happen. But what's going to happen at the end of the month, it sounds like, with 30 cards going in and out, and then like adding like not new concepts, but like reinforcing certain aspects of a tribe while presumably ditching or totally transforming other parts. That's going to have people who like it, people who don't like it. It's going to cause all sorts of problems, and so that's all shelved for the end of the month. They're going to put all that out at once, but the easy stuff, they got kind of got out of the way. That's my theory.
think so. So with this change, I'm looking forward to demons changing a ton. What I would like to see them keep for demons is this whole use your HP, yeah, in different ways. That just fits with this demon theme, right? Like the ability to tap into your HP to do extra stuff. It'd be nice to see it not just with weavers, and in fact, you are able to use your HP with other minions as you kind of tier up as well in some capacity. So I
Mm-hmm.
like that mechanic about demons, and I hope they keep it. Just the ability to use your HP to gain tempo or to gain resources in some way. I think that's pretty cool, and it would make them unique. Right?
Well,
It would
yeah.
make them
What's missing with
unique.
demons right now is something like something that centers your build. That you're like, oh, I have this. Now it's easier for me to go on, right? So that what do you call it? The gateway drug that gets you into the tribe, kind of sneakily. It doesn't really exist. You're either doing demons or you're not.
Yeah,
And like
it's you,
in
a lot of
shooty
times it's
demons,
wrath weavers.
yeah,
Yeah,
right. Like
which isn't good. Yeah.
yeah, in shooty demons you can get there, right? Like with the death rattles, and then you get you get your shooty demon minion, and then you're like, all right, I got something going on here, especially now that they buffed it. But for big demons, it really doesn't exist. It's just it's Pink Man, and then it's nothing.
Yeah. So for demons, I hope they fix that while keeping the HP aspect. For dragons, I want something more than just Calgos buying battle cries. That was kind of enough. Remember, dragons were like one of the first big additions to. Um, they were one of the first like big
They were the
additions to
first
the
new
game.
tribe.
Yeah. So that sort of like bland like scaling, I think everyone was okay with. Like, remember, this was still a world in which we had a lot of cards that weren't BG exclusives. Like, we just had a lot of cards that were still used in Hearthstone and then just kind of transported over here. So I think they have to change Calgos because if you get one Calgos or two Calgos or whatever, after that, it's like buy a lot of battle cries, find Nadina, not too much decisions to be made there. And I think for an end game build, you have to create some more interesting decisions. So I expect Calgos to be changed. I hope that they change it in some way, or they make some other mid dragons that like force you to make some decisions here or there. It just there's not so much decisions with dragons. It's whether or not you can get to the Calgos that is the biggest question. It's like, can you get there, and how do you get there? That's the biggest question in any meta.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope they fix that with dragons.
Uh, I don't know if they will, but it would be nice if dragons were more than this one dimensional. And if they do, it may be something similar, as in it's a tier 6 minion that drives the whole thing, just being more than Caligos, right? So I don't know. Well, we'll see. I feel like it's what are you gonna do? Like I'm thinking from a, like just a not a balance perspective, but from just a pure game design perspective. Dragons, they're big, they do stuff, right? So how are you going to change dragons so that tiers 1 through 4 do anything? Well, 1 through 4 is basically the early game in battlegrounds, and or I guess 4 is the mid game, 1 through 3 is the early game. Like, how would you do that without breaking the idea of dragons?
I don't know. We'll see what they do with the dragons, but I think just everyone is a little bit tired of the end game Caligos
Mm-hmm.
ramp at this point. Uh, moving on to Murlocs a little bit. I think Murlocs are fine. I really do. Like, I hope they don't change Murlocs a little bit too much. A lot of people have been discussing Oh, like what kind of six, like tier
Hmm.
6 unit should be given to Murlocs? I think it's perfectly fine for a tribe not to have a associated tier 6 minion. And in fact, it fits Murlocs, right? Like they're small, they like just kind of what are their weaknesses? Because they get a ton of huge communal buffs. They don't deal much face damage at all. Like, yeah, unless you keep like the Bran or the Bagurgle alive or something like that, a lot of your Murlocs are just dealing 1 to 2 damage to the opponent's face. Um, so you can't really smoke them down. And also just, they don't have cleave, they don't have any of it. They just sort of like, you can build them up early, you can buff them a lot. I like it. I think we can keep going with that theme. They don't need like a holy mackerel. They don't need, and of course, holy mackerel. The thing that was really toxic about that was the fact that like you they weren't just for Murlocs. They were just the best unit in the game by far. Um, so I think we're fine there. Piggies, it's interesting. I mean, it's new, right? So what they could do is just say the power level of piggies is something that we want to match. So they could just keep piggies like the same because it's new and say, you know what, well, we tested this, we like where this is going. Let's try to make all other tribes as cohesive and as powerful as piggies. That could work too. Piggies are the latest tribe, and you could tell it's like, okay, they created this whole blood gem system for it, right? And blood gems also work with all other tribes, but they work very well internally as well. It's just like a neat concept and sort of what BG design in 2021 should be, as opposed to sort of BG design at the very, very beginning. And so I think you can keep piggies the same. Beasts, I think, are really good too. I
Beasts
don't
have
know what
always been
changes.
pretty like
Yeah, beasts
stuff
are
has happened with
fine.
them, right? Like you can
Yeah,
do them early. Tier one beast is a great strategy. They have a cleave that is the lowest costing cleave in the game, so they're useful and they're also used in Menagerie. Then their end game is kind of complicated, can diverge in two different ways. Like it's in a good place. They already added bird. Like I would, I think if they wanted to be ambitious, they need to get rid of bird and then branch off in a different way. And that will be interesting because bird causes other kinds of design problems. But if they're not going to
bird
be that
causes an issue.
ambitious, like it's fine. It's what it is. It's fine.
Yep. So I think beasts are okay, and if they want to choose to use their resources, focusing on other tribes, I think that's absolutely fine. Beasts are in an okay spot right now. Elementals we talked about. Um, you gotta fix tier 6 elementals, like especially with how many minions and minion slots it takes up. You can't have it just be that crappy most of the time. Like I don't want to hear this about it's like, oh, Merps, there was this game where like I had the perfect rolls and blah blah, and then I got like double rag immediately, and then I snowball. Yeah, no, that doesn't count. Um, on average, and a lot of the times, tier 6 elemental sucks. Like Gar still sucks, right? Genie still doesn't do that much. Rag very, very rarely does anything. So that's just very unfortunate there.
I mean,
And they,
it's all so similar, right? It's just Caligos by a different name.
yeah, I mean, it's even worse because with
Well, yeah. I
Rag,
mean,
it's,
obviously it's worse. Like,
yeah,
but I mean, the mechanic is Caligos by
yeah,
a
the
different name.
mechanic, it's boring and it's random and it's worse. It's so bad. It's like so bad. Yeah. Um, plus it's like dragon scaling, like in true, like, multiple unit scaling, uh, there's only Calgos, whereas elementals there's also Nomi, right? So it
Mm-hmm.
looks even worse for that because they're like, hey, here's a better scaling thing
Yep.
earlier on.
Yep.
We talked about pirates. Mechs, I don't think need any changes. Mechs have always been, it's like, oh, solid, nice. It's like, can you win with it? Yeah, you could, not super often, but you still could. And they're like, they work well in Menagerie. They work well as a like half mech, half something else kind of thing. They have a lot of divine shields, which is useful. Mechs are just in a good spot, so I like that. We've gone through all of the tribes right now, and with 30 units, there is a lot to play around with. I'm sure, even though I'm saying mechs are fine, beasts are fine, etc. They're going to change some stuff with that, and I look forward to that. At the very least, it's going to be new and fresh.
And they're going to get rid of Khadgar.
Probably, yeah,
That is
probably,
a unit whose time has long gone. And if you're
yeah.
getting rid of 30 units and you're not touching Khadgar, I mean, they might even get rid of Brant or like replace him with something more battleground specific that does something similar. But Khadgar is definitely gone. Like, I don't even think they're going to replace the concept.
Yeah, I think Khadgar is just one of those things where it also limits design space as well. It's problematic, and I
Mm.
think at the end of the day, they're going to look at something like Khadgar and say it's just not worth it.
Yeah. And neutral taunt units, I'm looking at our chat from Scooby Doo Doo. Neutral taunt units are probably going to be gone too, I'm guessing, just because
I
those
don't know.
rotate
I'm
every
not
little
sure.
bit, and we've had these taunt units for quite a while.
The only thing that you want to ask, because right now the taunt units are a stabilizing force in the mid game. You could argue that they're a little bit too strong of a
You're
stabilizing
talking
force in the
about
mid game.
balance. There's no balance. Come
Right,
end of
right,
July, there is
right.
no balance.
It's just a matter of whether or not they still want the stabilizing force to be the taunt
Mm-hmm.
comp package, right? That's basically it. They like Blizzard knows that the mid game needs a stabilizing force, whether that is a tribe like we had with like mechs in some instances,
Mm-hmm.
or it is taunt comp. That's just up to them. I'm not sure. I think taunt comp is kind of fun. Like I know there's people out there that is like taunt comp has to be deleted. It's super toxic. I don't think it's toxic at all. Like I think it is very very fine. It's kind of a product of the meta, and just some things you can tweak a little bit here and there to make it better. But it's absolutely fine, and I totally understand if Blizzard doesn't touch it at all because I think if you change a lot of other things, taunt comp just naturally shifts in relation to those things as well.
And it's coming in on, when's this patch releasing? July 27th, they said?
No, well, that's the cosmetics.
Uh-huh.
They don't have a specific date for this, which is
Oh,
also
God.
fair. Like, yeah, they don't want to lock
No, no,
themselves
no.
in.
What I mean is, we are going to have the arena-focused card, evaluation stream on July 1st because it's being released on July 3rd. So if this Battlegrounds thing is hitting somewhere between July 25th and July, I don't know, like around the expansion. I guess if it hits after the expansion releases, we could talk about it in the week after. But it's gonna be so much stuff. It's so hard to
A lot
keep
of
up with
stuff.
Hearthstone these days.
There's a lot of things going on. They even had some dual changes. Wow, but we're not going to talk about those. Never talk about those. And then whenever Mercenaries comes out,
Oh yeah, Mercenaries are gonna come out before the next expansion release. I mean, before the third expansion releases, like before the end of the year.
yeah, before the end of the year. But other than that, we're not sure. They've been releasing a lot of information about how much they've worked on Mercenaries, which I totally believe. And they're like, this is our biggest kind of they were saying it's like their biggest endeavor since launching Hearthstone,
Wait,
as in
really?
yeah,
As in bigger
yeah,
than duels? Well, okay, I
bigger than
could I
duels.
could kind of see it
Yeah.
because they have to individually create content, right? So it's like
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So it's bigger than that. Obviously, it was bigger than BGs because if you
Hmm.
remember when BGs came out, it was just like it's like oh they just imported some cards and it was
Yeah,
like hey here's an auto battler.
yeah.
It's crazy how big BGs has gotten from like the initial product, which was polished, right?
Hmm.
But like nothing compared to the Blizzard quality polish
Yeah.
that we have seen a lot.
Well,
They
it's
just
because they
cobbled
had a
together this
simple
thing.
concept and they made it
They
fun
did.
and they made it work. And that was the problem with duels, is they had a very complicated concept. And they made it fun, but it didn't work. And it was not fun for long because it didn't work. Like, this is something that Blizzard, I feel like they lose it sometimes, and they try to do complicated stuff. But what they're really good at are the small, just keep things simple and elegant and focus on the not the crazy fun of it where you do a million things and then it becomes fun, but the fun that's just inherent in your base game, and then add the polish on top of that. Like, that's always what they're better at. Like, once the complicated stuff comes in, things start going haywire. It starts to Not just in Hearthstone, but I feel like in a lot of their games it gets like that.
Yep. Looking forward to Mercenaries because it does seem like they have put a lot of work into there. But really looking forward to this BG update. It's the reason that I'm back in BGs right now and playing. I want to make sure I have at least some of my instincts back before they drop this huge thing.
I need
That's a
to.
yeah.
I
That's it for
really
BGs for
hope
now.
that they make these changes, and along with these changes, either fix the rope or these changes themselves make it so that the rope is less prominent, especially if they're going to keep doing things like add spells in now and then. It's just too much for me to handle. Like I'm literally APM'd out of Battlegrounds. Like would I still be a good player if I played Battlegrounds and actually cared about it? Sure, but I don't think in this meta. Actually, I probably will. I'll probably be able to do something vaguely similar to what Shady does and be able to like crack a top 200. Not at his level, but
I
cracking
was
the
gonna
top
say, like, he's
200.
not just top
And
200.
that's what I
He's
mean,
like
right? Like I'll do some like crappy version of what he's doing with a little bit of my own flavor and be able to crack the top 200, but probably not much more than that because a lot of this game just requires too much. Like I call it APM, but it's not like just clicking, right? You have to like think about it. If you just randomly click on the board 100 times, it doesn't do anything. And there has to be a thought associated with the action. So that kind of APM, it's too high in this game, which again is so weird for a Hearthstone game to require really insanely high APM to like compete at the high levels. But whatever. I just if they do something to reduce that burden, I'll be back. I enjoy Battlegrounds as a concept. I just can't play it right now. They've structured the game in a way that I can't play it, be good, and enjoy myself. And it's not about balance. It's literally about what the game has become.
can't
Uh,
keep up as a boomer.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I hope this doesn't happen with more of the games. I've been able to like circumvent a lot of my natural bad APM stuff with by leaning on other things, but I'm hoping game design doesn't either shift in a way that requires more of this APM stuff, or that I'll be able to compensate more, even more than I have been able to historically. Because that's what you do as you get older. Like talking about us aging gamers. Merps is already 35. I'm about to turn 35 later this year. It's you gotta to play at a high level on games, even in card games. Apparently, it requires some stuff. And normally in your job, you start compensating for your lack of physical or mental um, what do you call it? Ability to do it good and do it fast, right? Like your horsepower, your mental and your physical horsepower. As that goes down, you replace it with experience and wisdom and general ability to lean on other aspects, which get better. That's just like how the human brain develops. Like you get smarter in some ways and dumber in other ways as you get older, brain wise. So we'll see. But a lot of it is game design, right? If the games are designed to just be Counter Strike, you're always going to just get worse as you get older. But if the games are designed like a little bit more like Overwatch, you're going to do better. If the games are designed with even more of this in mind, especially as gamers in general kind of get older, I don't know. Just something that I think about and kind of worry about because I don't want to be in the future like 10 years from now and only be able to play turn-based games. And not even most turn-based games because they're like Battlegrounds. Because Battlegrounds is a turn-based game. Technically.
Uh, kind of. Yeah.
Kind of, right?
Kind of,
Like if you're
yes.
describing
Kind
it,
of,
you're like,
yes.
it's kind of a turn-based game. But I'm like, no, I'm APM'd out of this like half turn-based game, which is very sad.
You are. You most definitely are. You got to stick with like XCOM 12.
Yeah. XCOM 12 will be great. All right. Let's move on from Battlegrounds into Arena. I want to cover a concept that we have been covering in bits and pieces over the course of the last 2 years because it's getting more and more important. But something that we keep saying is that your health is so much more important now than it was before. Like your opponent's health is so much more important before. Oh, we go face all the time now, even more so than we did before, even when we're not playing Merps Hunter. Even when we're playing like non-aggressive decks, we'll go face over trading. Just because face damage on your opponent's face is it's useful now. And that is, I think, is one of the most positive developments in general Blizzard game design, and it has impacted the arena in this way. Obviously, they don't design for arena, but especially after the core set hit, it became super apparent. This is just the new way. And this is one of the things I'm talking about, where you take something that's just elegant, like the arena drafting system, you put it with cards that are roughly of the same balance level, and you get a game that's just more full than if you try to tweak it a lot. Because it's not like Blizzard sat there and was like, okay, we're going to make face damage more important for arena. No one said that. Or to the extent that they're like, that would be nice, no one made any design decisions that pushed the game towards that direction. But it just naturally happened once they actually balanced things better with the core set and even out all the power levels. If you had a standard meta right now, rather than this like mixed wild rotation meta, face damage would be so important. Like right now, Arena's being held back a little because there's still kind of this wild meta. I'm not saying that's a bad design decision for Arena, but I'm just saying that face damage by Blizzard's base fundamentals design right now with the new core set would be even more important. Anyway, why is it so important? It's so important because the swings have gotten very consistent, very large, and very consistently of the same size. Before, there used to be a very wide range of swings where you can get a swing. Like normally if you just like get an extra mana or two worth of stuff, like deal 2 extra damage to something, that was a huge swing, right? But you can do an even bigger swing. Think about flame striking or hellfiring an entire board. Like that's a huge swing. Abyssal Enforcer, gigantic swing possibilities, right? Kind of like how Cycle of Hatred or Performance or Expendable Performers works now. They're just gigantic swings, and there's just so much fewer of those relative to your normal swing. And the normal swing that's anchoring today's meta, I think, is Shavera. And it also is is a guy called a Tutor? It's the 4-mana 2/5 Spellburst guy that deals 2 damage to everything.
Wretched Tutor.
Wretched Tutor, yeah. So between Shavera and Tutor, those are your 2 neutral swing cards that very directly swings. Other cards, like Raider, for example, swings too. It's just you deal 5 damage and then you get a 1 whatever taunt. Like that's a pretty big swing for 5 mana for a neutral card. But Shavera and Tutor really anchor it. So to calculate the amount that life is important in the end, you need to know, after you do a swing, how much pressure you put on your opponent's face. Because if the amount of pressure you put on your opponent's face is more than the amount of health your opponent has remaining, then you put lethal pressure on them. You're like, checkmate, right? And then they have to like do something in order to not be checkmated anymore. And it's arena, so sometimes they just can't do anything. They just lose, right? So it's a pretty good thing to put your opponents in checkmate in arena. In check, not mate. But following that, so obviously in that case, the bigger the swing, the higher the amount of pressure you can put, which means the higher your opponent's life total has to be for them to be safe. And same with you, because your opponents can do the same swing to you naturally with just like 1 neutral card. So you have to keep a higher health also in order to feel safe. But beyond that, beyond the immediate pressure, is the subsequent pressure. So the subsequent pressure is that in the next turn, you may not be able to get the perfect conditions to get a really large swing again, but you'll still be able to output a lot of pressure. That pressure then extends outwards, and that hasn't really changed much besides being elevated by a lower percentage than the swing, but it's still the subsequent pressure. Like if I go face all this turn and I'm able to deal 10 damage and you have 14 health, that doesn't mean you're safe. You still have to clear my board plus whatever else that I'm putting out onto the board, or I may have some reach cards, and then you're screwed anyway, right? So we all know this is happening. Now, numbers-wise, swing has changed so that, and I'm not going to break it down too much, but between 2 and 3 cards get played each turn that have an impact on the board at 10 mana, and each card adds on top of your normal swing potential, which is the amount of mana that you use. Each card adds 2 more units. So if you play a 5 mana card, that's 5 plus 2, that's 7, roughly like that. It scales up as you use higher as you use higher mana cards. But if you use higher mana cards, you get to play fewer cards, so it all kind of evens out. So the swing is very, very, very consistent in Hearthstone right now. Your total swing potential, and it ends up being equal to, if you have enough cards and they can all be played on the same turn, or at least in the way that it uses up all of your mana, and they're at roughly similar values, meaning no old cards, no cards that involves combos that you don't have, no cards that are super situational and the situation isn't triggering. You would be able to get roughly the ability to clear 10 mana off your opponent and put 10 mana onto your side, roughly. That's every turn starting on turn 10 onwards. That's your swing potential. That's your opponent's swing potential. This is how Blizzard designed the game. If you don't have a combo, if you just do normal things, such as Chimeras, such as I played an Expendable Performers, obviously that's an overpowered card, so that doesn't really count. But like, if you're just playing Flame Strikes and playing whatever, you're going to get that kind of swing, and that should be the swing that you expect. You should not be surprised, starting on turn 10, when your opponent gets rid of, let's say, 2 of your 5/5s and puts out 2 of his 5/5s in one single turn. You should look at that and not say, oh my god, my opponent had a great turn, and instead say, okay, my opponent did normal stuff. Now, if your opponent played Expendable Performers and then put a 3-drop out, your opponent would have 4 1/1s and a 3-drop. And you would not have stuff anymore. And you can see, right? Like, even in that scenario, your opponent has roughly done the same type of swing. That's why Expendable Performance is quote-unquote balanced, but you get too much decision-making in Expendable Performance. It's too flexible. That's what makes it kind of imbalanced. But anyway, on raw power-wise, on the normal board, Expendable Performance is not, like, vastly overpowered compared to everything else. So getting back to the numbers. That means whenever you do a swing, you can expect to put 10 damage on your opponent's face. On average, you know that you should be very wary of being within 4 damage, because there's a neutral card right now that deals 4 damage to your opponent's face. It's actually 2, but only one of them is relevant. And there's a lot of ways to deal 2 damage to your opponent's face. So 12 to 14 health are varying levels of dangerous. Like, at 10 health, you're just in danger regardless of whether your opponent has cards or not, even if you can clear his board the next turn. At 12 health, you're in a bit of danger. You're not in like full danger anymore, but you're still in a lot of danger. At 14 health, you're still in significant danger of just not being able to do anything and just like ending it the next turn. So we are now at 14 health of potential issues, even if you're able to play minions, even minions with taunt and stuff. But as long as you're not actually removing your opponent's minions off the board, you're kind of in trouble. So this will govern 2 ways of playing. One is, if you can hit that magic number starting at around 14, or if you know that you have fireballs in your deck, or the rogue 6 damage card that can go face, you can stretch it out to 16. If you know you have a hero power like Hunter or whatever, you can stretch it out even further. But your goal is just to get something like 16 damage on your opponent for most decks. And 16 damage, if you just go face rather than trading, it happens way more often than not. It's also why you're throwing weapons to your opponent's face more often now, because getting it down to that 14 health range is super important. And at the same time, if you get down to the 14 or 12 health range, or if you know that your opponent, because of the minions you've left on the board the next turn, if they choose to attack your face, can bring you down to that health range, what you need to start doing is to keep removals in your hand. Is to keep things that'll make it so after your opponent does a swing, you don't automatically lose. And I think both that offensive part and that defensive part is something most people don't like play well. Because when I'm playing, I keep getting a lot of like suggestions, especially on the defensive part, to do some crazy things with my removals rather than just holding them. But what you need to do when you have removals, especially when you have like few removals, obviously if you have a handful of removals, you have to use them. But if you just have 1 or 2 removals, you want to hold them until after your opponent swings, if you have low health. If you have high health, you can use them to proactively remove your opponent's stuff so that you can get damage onto your opponent's face. And then put them in that danger zone for your next swing. So that's how the game is lining up in Arena right now, where you're always looking at, like, once 10 mana gets hit, or even before 10 mana, but the math gets less and less before 10 mana, right? But anyway, it caps out at 10 mana. That's the swing you're worried about. From a defensive perspective, that's the swing you're looking to get from an offensive perspective. And the way to and so in order to get this done, you are worried about two things. One is getting the swing, and the other part is following up on the swing. Or conversely, one is preventing the swing, which you can't do. And two is dealing with what happens after your opponent's swing, which you can do. And again, this depends on how much health your opponent has and how much health you have. So I feel like if people internalize that kind of strategy for the end game, it helps a lot more on your decision making of when to use your initiative cards. It also should inform when you use heals. Just you don't need to heal too quickly. You can heal later on, but you can't wait too much because that 14 health buffer. So between those two, and remember, taunts people can remove, so taunts are not great. They're like they're like kind of like a desperation move. You should expect your taunts to get removed, what, like 75% of the time?
I don't know about that. Uh,
Like if your
that
opponent
seems a little
sets
bit
up
high. That seems a
lethal,
little bit high.
if your opponent sets up lethal and you put out a taunt, you I don't survive more than 25% of the time after.
Okay.
That.
Oh, in that instance,
Yeah.
sure. Okay. All right.
Because it's after a swing, right? You're responding with a taunt rather than a removal because you don't have removals or the mana doesn't work out or whatever.
Sure. Okay.
So yeah, that's the deep fried meta. For how swing has kind of totally changed what the calculus is between prioritizing face damage or your own face damage. Yeah. One of the good things about trading is that your opponent then doesn't get to decide whether to go to your face or to trade with you. So if you need to defend, you need to defend, right? But trading has now become just as much about preventing face damage as it is about like getting an extra stat on the board. Because extra stats on the board are not terribly important anymore compared to what they were before. But your face damage is way more important. And yeah, and what you're giving up is damage to your opponent's face. Like that very basic decision making process has gotten a lot more interesting and complicated since Core Set launched. And really, it's been trending that way for like a year or two before that.
The thing that people I don't think really internalize is it's still about okay, so here's the thing, guys. At the end of the day, it's still about card advantage, and options. But here's the thing. In metas past, especially in very early metas, the best way to secure card advantage was to trade. And these days, the best way to secure card advantage or options is to go face. Because when you go face, what you're effectively doing is you're taking away a lot of their cards. So they can have 8 cards in hand. As they get lower, as their options get crappier, that Proto Drake, you effectively discarded it from their hand, right? They can't play it. It's just it's a non-taunt 8 mana 8/8. It sucks.
So it's not that card advantage is equally as important, because I think card advantage is definitely less important than it was before, but options are even more important right now because there's just fancier cards.
What we do is we equate card advantage with options a lot of times. And right now it is more about just the options. And so in metas past, this entire thing about card advantage equaling, like if you look at the Venn diagram, it will be like super overlap, right? Options equals card advantage. Right now, you still have some overlap there. It's a little bit further apart. And also, in order to limit their options, you go face. This is how you effectively discard or like dormant, like in their hand, basically, their Proto Drake, right? Like this is how you make some really big things. Maybe the Ysera, right? On turn 9, they can't really play it because they can play on turn 9, but the Nightmare, that's the only thing that they can play in that turn. It's not enough. Maybe they don't even get to it, right? Like so, this is the important stuff. Like in metas past, the best way to preserve your options advantage, and that was almost a 1-to-1 options equals the number of cards you had versus your opponent's cards, versus today, in which you want to win the options kind of war. And by winning the options war and by limiting their options, you kill them. You are able to hit them in the face because they run out of options to prevent you from killing their face. That's by going face nowadays. And that's one of the big differences, where you are able to more effectively transform this face damage into an options advantage. Whereas before, you going face was just you going face. That was it. It was like you going face. And this is why in metas previously, a lot of times it was like trade, and at the end, okay, the game's over. Now we go face.
Now we go face, yeah.
Now we go face.
But keep in mind that this also works for your opponent. So, like I was saying before about the trading thing, half of trading, if not more, is now about preventing face damage to you. So when you're thinking of trading rather than thinking about tempo, just look at what your opponent can do to you. If you have lower health and your opponent can put you to having even fewer options so you can't play your Proto Drake, well, maybe you should trade. You know, maybe you should, even if you have like a 2-2 and they have a 5-5, maybe you should throw that 2-2 in, play something that deals 3 damage that, you know, can kill off the remaining body and play defensively. Literally to play defensively because you value your health so that you can have options to play in the future of that Proto Drake or whatever else you may play. Rather than previously where you're doing it in order to have like an extra like 5-1 or like, you know, an extra like 4-2 or whatever remaining on the board that you wouldn't in the other case, right? Like before, the calculus is like, hey, if I could get like a 4-1 or like a 3-2 on the board, that is worth way more than getting my opponent down 4 more health. Way more. Now, it's like, I don't know, that's kind of fair. Like, if that was what I'm getting, I'm not really gaining much. I'm just deciding, right? Whether I want tempo or I want face damage. But they're fair trades now. And when there's more fair trades, what tips it over the edge is, well, hold on. Do I want to make sure that my opponent doesn't remove my minions and then go face, and then all of a sudden I'm down to 14 health or whatever, and then I can't play my cards? Because if that becomes a possibility, well, maybe you play defensively and it tips the balance towards trading because you're now also getting a 4-2 and you're preventing face damage, right? So the end goal of all this is not to say always go face or go face most of the time even. It's that the way you're thinking about this should consider a lot more than tempo and card advantage now on whether to trade, and a lot more about preventing damage to yourself and dealing damage to your opponents.
All right, that's it.
GG's.
Cool. All right. Hopefully we have more stuff to preview next week.
Probably not.
Who knows?
I feel like they're not revealing. It's going to be a 2-week run up to release, right? Or like 1.5 weeks even. So I don't think we're going to see anything by next Sunday. But we'll keep you guys prepped and excited for the oncoming stuff. End of July looks like when it'll hit. And it'll hit hard with both Battlegrounds and Arena's new content. All right. Until next week, then. By the way, a shout out to our patrons at patreon.com/grinandgoat. We're putting the list together. We'll give specific shout outs on the next episode. Until then, this is ADWCTA.
This is Merp. See you guys.
See ya.